In the scene in which Jesus is baptized, we're told of the heavens breaking open. In some versions, a dove descends and words are heard. You are my beloved, my own. On you my favor rests. This is a scene in which it's declared that Jesus is of God. Now, in Jesus' day, what did it mean for God's favor to rest upon you? Well, people thought of wealth. Plenty of money and property and animals and robes. Wealth was seen as a sign of God's favor. If someone was wealthy, that meant God was pleased with them. What else did it mean to be favored by God? This usually meant a wife or wives and lots of children. Children, especially boys, were considered a sign of divine blessing. What was another sign of blessing? The favor of God. Health. Forget about genetics and chemicals and diet and contagion. If you were healthy, this was considered favor from God. And if you had all of this, then you usually had the respect of the community, which was considered another sign of being favored by God. What's wrong with this picture? Jesus, the one considered favored of God, is not known for wealth. In fact, we're told he had no home. He's not known for having a wife. We don't know. Or children, or health. Really, I mean, when you're dead at 33, that's not really a long life like Abraham or Methuselah or these other biblical figures who lived well past 100. And what happens directly after this scene, declaring that Jesus has received God's blessing? Is there a party? A celebration? The Messiah is finally here? Does Jesus get a weekend at a spa at the Dead Sea? No. We're told that he's driven by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days. No food, no water, no human companionship, no comforts, no provisions, just driven into the wilderness for 40 days. Yes, 40 is an important number in the Bible. The Hebrews wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Elijah was consigned to the wilderness for 40 days. Elijah survived his time in the wilderness, so there was comfort in that for Jesus. Will Jesus survive? We'll see. I think of this time in the wilderness as a time of unlearning. Unlearning the social messages about what it means to be, for one thing, blessed by God. Unlearning dependency on wealth, on comfort, on the values of the society around us, unlearning victimhood, and so much more. Getting out from under societal expectations, especially the expectations of a Messiah. Unlearning all these things that build up in a person as they go through their days, layers of coating upon coating that build up and remain largely unseen. Yet it's there, constraining and controlling our attitudes and behaviors. In his book, The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin begins with an essay entitled Letter to My Nephew on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation. This book was written in 1963. In the letter, Baldwin confronts the harm that can be caused by being programmed by the society around us. He says this about the nephew's grandfather, who was Baldwin's father. Well, he is dead. He never saw you, and he had a terrible life. He was defeated long before he died because at the bottom of his heart, he really believed what white people said about him. The wilderness is a place to peel off all those layers of programming and cultural assumptions. And they're there. Baldwin, writing in 63, had this to say about some of the cultural assumptions that were being absorbed at that time by whites. He says that their ancestors were all freedom-loving heroes, that they were born in the greatest country the world has ever seen, and that Americans are invincible in battle and wise in peace, that Americans have always dealt honorably with Mexicans and Indians and all other neighbors or inferiors, and that American men are the world's most direct and virile, that American women are pure. We have a lot of unlearning to do, don't we? I also think of the time in the wilderness as a time of learning. It's a time of learning to rely entirely on divine love, on the goodness of creation, on the goodness within us. It's a time to learn not only how to survive, but how to thrive with a heart completely rooted in love, with no delusions or distractions. In his letter to his nephew, Baldwin talks about the importance of love. He talks about the love that was felt when the nephew was born. Here you were, to be loved, baby, hard, at one and forever, to strengthen you against the loveless world. In the wilderness, Jesus learned to rely on love, despite whatever else was going to be going on around him. Now, each year we observe the season of Lent, and this is our time to unlearn and to relearn all that we need, so that we can once again be fully rooted in divine love. Lent's about coming home to God, so that we're not controlled by greed or fear or image or the society around us. Jesus is blessed by God beyond measure, and we don't see him amassing wealth or family or health or status. And yet from him we learn what it is to live a life favored by God, a blessed life. We learn to be rooted once again in love, for it's love and only love that will save us. We end with Baldwin's testimony to the power of love. He says, white people in this country will have quite enough to do in learning how to accept and love themselves and each other. And when they have achieved this, which will not be tomorrow and may very well be never, the Negro problem will no longer exist. It will no longer be needed. So may this holy season of Lent, of wilderness and all that goes with it, be a time for us to grow in love for God, for ourselves, for our neighbors, our enemies, and our earth. Amen.